Hey guys, this is Pete with Geekocalypse, and we don't have a podcast this week. I'm really sorry. But you do get a cool video with me in it talking to you about podcasts in general. So, since we don't have a podcast this week, we're taking a little bit of a holiday break. I thought it'd be cool to give you two suggestions from me, two suggestions from Dave of podcasts that we like to listen to all the time, and they're very geeky. So the first one I would recommend is a podcast called Writing Excuses. It's really good. There's like 4 or 5 professional writers that do 15-minute long episodes that talk about just different forms of writing. They're mostly science fiction writers or fantasy writers, like Brandon Sanderson, who wrote like a bunch of fantasy novels. You may have heard of him. He wrote The Way of Kings. There's Howard Taylor, who does a webcomic. Anyway, they're quick, bite-sized commute style podcasts that really are great, because it really teaches you a little about writing, the creative process, stuff like that. Super geeky. One of Dave's suggestions is the Dungeons and Dragons podcast, which he says it's the bee's knees for all the latest news on Dungeons and Dragons. So if you're into that, they keep you up to date on the Dungeons and Dragons world. My next suggestion is the H.P. Lovecraft Literary Podcast. If you're like a horror novel fan, this is definitely the podcast for you. What they do is they have like 200 episodes, and they go through and talk about, from episode 1, they did like a history of H.P. Lovecraft, a little bit of like his life, how he writes, and then from then on they'll do 30-minute episodes where they will review. They'll cover a story. So chronologically, from his first short story to his final work, they'll talk about it, and they do a great job. It's really great because they have music that's really intense and really great. They put a lot of heart and a lot of work into it, but they also give like behind the scenes, what was going on during the time. They draw the similar like thing, like they basically break down the story and just talk about it, and they give a little bit of their personal like take on it, but it's pretty subjective, which is really cool. They work really hard on it, which they really produce the podcast. Unlike Geekocalypse, where we're just like, okay, let's talk about this. Boom, let's go. They do a lot of research and put a lot of work into it. Dave's other suggestion is the Making It podcast. He says it's a new podcast where builders discuss their techniques of creating things, and he says Nader 2016. So I guess he's voting for Ralph Nader. Anyway. Yeah, so if you like to build things or like have interest in like tinkering, stuff like that, sounds like that's a great podcast. And I want to suggest one last podcast is Watch Out for Fireballs, which is a retro video game podcast where it's actually a buddy I work with, Cole Ross, and Gary Butterfield. They record the podcasts. They live in different states, but they record, hours of content. They'll just cover a popular retro video game, and I love listening to something. If I really want to dig deep into a game and like everything behind it, I see if they did a podcast on it, because they go through the whole game from beginning to, and I just listen to the I Have No Mouth But I Cannot Scream video game, which is a game I don't really intend on playing, but I read the short story by Harlan Ellison, and it was really good. It was a really creepy, weird story, but you know, the game is out, and they made a game around it. So I was like, instead of actually playing the game, I just listened to the podcast, which is great because I got to experience it, you know, that way. They also did like Final Fantasy VII. They did a bunch of cool stuff. So I recommend all those things. So Writing Excuses, H.P. Lovecraft Literary Podcasts, watch out for Fireballs, Dungeons and Dragons. Wait, what was it? The Dungeons and Dragons podcast, Making It podcast. Those are all stuff. Those are things we listen to and we're inspired by and encouraged by. So check one of those out and see if you like them. And in the meantime, happy holidays. And we are looking for. It's almost been a full year for Geekocalypse, so we're really looking forward to it. We're looking forward to recording new things. We have some new ideas and some new fun things in store for this next year. So, guys, thank you so much for listening. We'll be back up soon, as soon as we can. So, what podcast do you like to listen to? Let us know. Like, I'm always looking for new podcasts.